a personal story from my father-in-law. He told us years ago that when he was in high school and stuff, he used to do like he had a band, but he didn't play any instruments, and he was an air band, and
Yeah.
they would set like have shows. They'd have these house parties, and like 200 kids would show up, and we would always like make fun because I think they were Van Halen air band,
Yeah.
and we me, my wife, and his wife, my mother-in-law, always make fun of him, like, oh, they were called the Pellas. The Pellas are gonna show up, at the whatever they're playing the fair tonight, whatever the case is. It's just funny, but now it's just interesting that you bring that up because, like, you're right, it was way before video culture, so like that's way before any of that stuff. He was born in like what something like 66 or something like that, so it's the exact same era that you were born in. So now I feel a little guilty making fun of him.
Oh,
When
cool.
he-
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do think it's kind of an embarrassing thing to create. I mean, as an adult, I would just be horrified if I were to act out music for people and when they could watch me act out music. But you could also see, like, for a child
yeah,
who doesn't have any experience with an instrument, the kinetic connection to
yeah.
music. That it's audio, but it's kinetic. It's audio kinetic. So and also there are lyrics, so there's narrative,
Mm,
and then there are also, like, I don't know, when you hear the combination of the whole thing, like the gestalt effect of it is that it can be quite dramatic.
yeah.
Uh,
Especially
so
in a time that, like you said, way before video. So
yeah,
in order to see Van Halen, you only saw them once every 4 years when they came to your city.
if that,
So yeah, if they came to your city, exactly.
yeah,
So I now talking about it, it makes a little more sense as to, like, hey, if you love Van Halen, you could see people playing it to some degree with a live kind of feel, whether actually live or not. It's a very interesting perspective that makes me appreciate his his middle school
yeah.
and
I
high
mean,
school. You
I
know,
think I think like to some degree, all of the arts are gonna you're gonna find points of connection amongst the arts, but like for kids to be acting out music, well, there's an element of acting in it, and there's
yeah,
an element of drama in it that
yeah,
is
very interesting, man.
it's not separate from the music, but you can see how it's sort of all of a sudden it becomes adjacent to acting itself and the drama of a play or a movie. And it's like, I just think that it's normal for kids to want to have a kinetic relationship with music, especially like for a kid such as myself and other kids like me. I know there are a lot of kids like this, but like I had no ingrained interest in sports.
Mm,
And in fact, sports were very confusing to me because the only reason I did sports is because I thought I had to. And then it was discovered that it wasn't so much that I was not athletic at all. It was that I was confused and disinterested in the rules. I didn't know whether I was on offense or defense necessarily, or I would forget. Whereas it seemed like the sort of like laws of music, when it came to engaging in music,
hmm
there was a sense from my teacher that I was already engaged in trying to figure out what those laws and rules were. So that was completely the opposite from sports. Like I was a total space cadet when it came to sports, and then music was already something that my mind was working on before I even played.
hmm
I was trying to figure it out.
It's super interesting, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, when you were telling the story, you mentioned that when you started to play with Jeff, it was a career-defining moment that led to a lot of opportunity after the fact.
Yeah,
So kind of what we were talking about before we started filming, just the whole goal with the idea of sharing these stories is kind of like showing people that it's possible to make something in the industry. But sometimes people are like, okay, I want to do something in the industry, and I know it's possible. I just don't know how to kind of get there. I don't know how to connect the dots. So could you elaborate just a little bit more on how those dots connected for you, going from like these gigs, playing small little venues or playing with small little gigs, getting fired, getting hired, to then playing with a huge name, and then how that led to so many more opportunities. It's kind of like that connection of dots.
one thing I will say to young people is that if you experience what feels like complete devastation, like if you fail or are perceived to have failed, or if you get fired, or if the people around you have decided you're not good enough, and then you actually agree with them that you're not good enough, and that hurts you a whole hell of a lot, that actually would describe perfectly many of my experiences. That those are part of the experiences of, I think, probably most successful artists. Like, I feel like a lot of successful artists probably have the very same experiences of people who experience some type of failure that is so painful that they quit.
Mm,
In other words, I don't think the all of the successful artists, and musicians or whatever, I don't think that they lived a life where they did not fail,
yeah,
and
sure.
and, and they did not experience a devastating pain.
Mm.
I think that probably many of them did, and I certainly did. And I think that a lot of what artists I think do is try to have a bit of a negotiation with fate or with whatever it is that you've been handed and say, well, I've been dealt a certain pack of cards here. You know, I have these assets and I have these kind of handicaps or whatever they're called. You know, I have these liabilities, let's call them. And you know, how can I be useful? How can I be in this game? What role will I be suited for where I could be remunerated and I could be in the flow of music or in some way creative? So that leads me to the idea that a lot of that stuff isn't really linear. Like my vision of what I might have wanted to be when I was 14 or 10 or 18 or 25, you know, those are different ideas and ideals or archetypes of what I might be able to achieve or be seen as or whatever or what I might be able to do in terms of my capabilities or something like those are all different narratives. So you know some of it is just there's a bit of flexibility there with accepting or possibly rejecting roles that you might take on
Hmm.
in order to kind of push the whole professional side of things forward.
Yeah, very
I mean, I
interesting.
think, they're different. There's part of the spectrum. You could be doing something that's very creatively rewarding and it's well compensated for, financially or not. And then you could be something that's completely creatively stultifying and is either well remunerated or not. There's infinite combinations almost of those things. So then you're going to have to get into how do you define success?